going inside the issues of our community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. Globalization propels more and more Americans to visit, work, and live in China, India, Africa, the Middle East, and other places. And an upsurge of immigration throws many of us into encounters in our neighborhoods and our workplaces with people whose cultural and religious traditions are beyond the confines of Christianity and Judaism. The Jewish community has just finished celebrating Hanukkah. Tomorrow, Christians celebrate Christmas. This seems like the perfect morning to explore the opportunities and challenges Americans have at the beginning of the 21st century, to think about our society in larger terms, and to engage in interreligious dialogue. In the second half of the show, we will explore the historic process of cultural assimilation for one group, Cincinnati Reformed German Jews. But we begin this morning with a man who's devoted his life to fostering interreligious dialogue. For almost 3 decades at Xavier University, Paul Knitter taught theology with a focus on the theology of religions, religious pluralism, and interreligious dialogue. Although Paul, quote unquote, retired from Xavier 4 years ago, in 2 weeks he assumes the position as the Paul Tillich Professor of Theology, World Religions and Culture at Union Theological Seminary in New York City, which the seminary describes as, quote, a microcosm of the world where the local and global intersect. Paul, welcome back to Newsmakers.
Very happy to be here now.
Congratulations. This is a tremendous opportunity to go to Union Theological and be able to continue the work that you've been about.
As unexpected as it's tremendous.
Yeah, it's just really fascinating. The last time you were here, and I want to remind people that you're not just somebody who sits in a classroom or sits in your office and writes. Last time you were here, you had just returned from a State Department sponsored trip to Pakistan for some dialogue with Muslim community, including a session with the President, Musharraf.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Is this something that actively, in the last 4 years, how actively, where have you pursued those kinds of discussions?
Well, especially in the East, in Asia, Pakistan. During that trip, we also met with Muslim leaders in India and in Bangladesh. Since then, I've been working particularly with Muslim groups in Indonesia at the University of Yogyakarta, where I've just been very inspired by the kind of openness and eagerness to engage in interreligious dialogue on the part of Muslim students at that university.
In this situation where you're bringing people together with very different traditions, how do you get it started? What's the way to get something started?
Yeah, that's a very important question. Kind of where do we start? Where do we find common ground? In the past, the attempts have been made to find common ground in the area of beliefs. Mm-hmm. Kind of where do we have common beliefs? But that can be very, very difficult and even, some would say, dangerous insofar as to find what you have in common. There's the danger of watering down what is your own distinctive identity in order to meet in the commonality with others. So today, instead of starting with what we have in common in our beliefs, common beliefs, the stress is on, let's start with common problems. Mm-hmm. In other words, what are the issues? What are the concerns that touch us all?
For example, with those students in Indonesia, what might be some things that you would talk about?
Well, what they were talking about there is primarily the issue of interreligious tensions leading to interreligious conflict, which usually, almost always, is in the context of international conflicts and tensions. So their concern was how do we prevent the abuse, the exploitation of our religions to foster violence? How do we turn religion into a means for peace instead of a means for the justification of violence?
If you brought some of your students from Xavier and took them to Indonesia with you, one set of students coming out of a Christian tradition by and large, another coming out of a Muslim tradition, and you put that issue on the table, would those students, common ages, similar ages, would they approach that, would they see the same questions at stake initially and say we may approach this from different angles, but the questions are the same for us?
Well, the questions are the same insofar as they feel threatened. I mean, by the aggression, what seems to be the aggression of another party. So the commonality is there. Where the differences are, and this is where it makes for a productive dialogue, is that in the analysis of what is causing the tension or what might be causing the violence. But when two different groups come together, and I've seen this again and again, out of a shared concern to try to offset violence and to create peace, in the actual working together, trying to analyze the issues together, coming to learn each other's fears, coming to learn each other on this personal level, in their shared commitment. Once that personal level is introduced based on a shared concern, friendships develop. And on the basis of friendships, that's where real authentic dialogue can take place.
You know, you've mentioned several times in this particular example, you've mentioned the term peace. We're in a season, especially for Christians, where there's a lot of talk about peace on earth. Something like Christmas, especially in our society where Christmas is, and sometimes stripped of its religious meaning, but it is the dominant, right now it's a dominant feature of our society. Everybody's plugged into it, one way or another. Is that a good, trying to create dialogue with Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus who live in the United States, is something like Christmas a potential help or is it a hindrance?
Well, I think it can be a help, and I base that on the experiences that I had especially in India. When my family and I lived in India for 5 months, they shared the holidays of the distinctive religions there, Hinduism, Islam, and Christianity primarily in India. It was just common in the villages and even in sections of some of the larger cities that Christians would invite their Muslim and their Hindu friends to their homes to share in their Christmas candies, and even to the point of sometimes the Hindus wanting to at least be present for the Christian liturgical celebrations. I mean, so this was it, but they could do that because at that time there was this sense of we are neighbors. We are different religious neighbors, but we are all neighbors to each other in our religious differences. And the same thing would go for the Hindu feast of Diwali. That would just be natural that you go to your Christian neighbors to share your candies.
So there could be some going back and forth there.
Yeah.
What is the goal of something like, of this large thing, interreligious dialogue? I mean, you talked about you have to be careful that you don't water everything down. What is the goal here? Is it finding so many commonalities that we all end up in this exact same place? Or is it something different than that?
Oh, I think if you look at if you look at the teachings of the various religions of the world, all of them in very different ways, but all of them are trying to promote the greater well-being of people in this world, and then ultimately, for many religions, in the next world. But this goal of wanting to create a more peaceful environment where people can flourish in their beliefs. So the purpose of the dialogue is to draw the religious communities together to make use of their distinctive contributions to human well-being. And now today we would add, as many religions are, to environmental well-being. So it's not, the intent is not to reduce them all to one big religious soup, or into one common religion, but to preserve the distinctiveness of each, and through the dialogue to make the shared contribution more effective, and in doing that, to deepen one's own religious identity and faith because of the dialogue with someone from another religion.
And I find it interesting, and here I'm going to share a personal thing, that you've been devoted to this interreligious dialogue. You still think of yourself as a Christian.
Oh, yeah.
And you still think of yourself as a Roman Catholic. You and I share the same parish. And so despite all of these, and I know you're fascinated by insights from different teachers, and that you still remain where you stand, or where you stand where you started, in one sense.
Right. I stand where I started, Dan, and here one always has to be careful in making judgments about oneself, but I think I am, or I feel challenged to be, I think a more authentic Christian. That means taking the gospel of Jesus Christ more seriously because of my conversations. And for me, it's especially because of my conversations, my dialogue with Buddhism. I'm working on a book right now and trying to lay out how Buddhism has challenged me to be a better Christian. So, and I think that's a challenge that appeals to more and more people.
We only have about a minute left, but taking on this new challenge at Union Theological, and if people haven't been to Union Theological, it's a wonderful place in Manhattan to live. Yeah. What's your hope that you can accomplish as you take on the Paul Tillich chair?
Well, my hope is that I might fulfill what they told me are their general expectations, that this seminary wants to introduce an awareness of other religions, an openness to other religions, an ability to cooperate with other religions into the entire theological education of these future ministers, so that you will have ministers and priests in the future who, in their proclaiming of the gospel, will make it clear that, as one theologian puts it, Jesus is the way that is open to other ways, that calls us to friendship and cooperation with others.
Well, Paul, thanks for all you have done here in Cincinnati for the last 3 decades. Good luck in the future, and you know I love New York, so I'll be up to visit you.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it.
And thank you
much
for this morning. Stay tuned after the break, a Cincinnati tradition of celebrating Christmas that reveals much about immigration, America, and the desire to assimilate.
The differences. When the Eastern European Jews came over, they didn't want to assimilate. The German Jews' goal was to assimilate. They might have as well not have been on the same planet.
We used to decorate our Christmas tree, and the rabbi's sons used to come up and help.
I was sent by my parents to Cincinnati to participate in the Christmas parties. 2 solid weeks of parties, morning, noon, and night, without stopping. It was almost a Victorian system.
It never occurred to me that Jewish people weren't supposed to have a Christmas tree. When I went to Walnut Hills and made Jewish friends, they were all really amazed that I had a Christmas tree. And I remember they would come to my house and help trim it because they had never trimmed a Christmas tree before. As obviously I've matured, I understand that this was really a very German Jewish thing in Cincinnati.
Welcome back. In the 1840s and 50s, tens of thousands of immigrants from German-speaking Central European states settled in Cincinnati. Jews were one element of that influx. The mid-19th century German Jewish community became the foundation upon which Reform Judaism was founded and built by great leaders like Rabbis Isaac Mayer Wise and Max Lilienthal. Plum Street Temple and Hebrew Union College are critical institutions in the world of Reform Judaism. A new documentary entitled These Are Jews by Ruth Goldman, who grew up in Cincinnati and now lives in Buffalo, explores the world of Cincinnati German Jews. The underlying theme of the documentary is the implications of assimilation, and one thread focuses on the role of Christmas celebrations among Cincinnati Reform German Jews.
Every Christmas, we were invited to the home of relatives of my stepfather to sit around their Christmas tree and they all wished each other Merry Christmas, and they passed out presents, and they were acting as if this was their holiday, and they were all very happy to celebrate the season. It was uncomfortable for me, but all right, why not? They were relatives. Until I had children. And the last time I went was when my first child was an infant. When we were invited the next year, I didn't want to hurt their feelings, but I had to tell them no, that this year he would be old enough to understand, and that he just wouldn't be able to to catch on to how a Jewish family would be going to another Jewish family's house to celebrate Christmas.
I am joined now by Dr. Gary Zola, the Executive Director of the Jacob Marcus Center for American Jewish Archives at Hebrew Union College. Gary, welcome back.
Thanks, Dan.
This is an amazing, intriguing, surprising documentary, and I think it would be very surprising for people who aren't Jewish and maybe don't know that much about Judaism. What's your reaction? I know you showed this at Hebrew Union College. People came and talked. What's your reaction?
Well, I look at it as a historian, and it's very interesting, this whole phenomenon. It's really a reflection of the unique role that Christmas plays in American culture. When you think about it, Dan, Christmas really is the only holiday of so many holidays that have a place in the American culture that has both secular component and a distinctly religious component. In a certain sense, this national holiday, this federal holiday, is really two separate holidays with the same name, Christmas. Christmas, the holiday of gift giving, good tidings, warm feelings, humanity, caring, family. Those are values that every American would share. On the other hand, at the very same time, it is distinctly also a religious holiday. They have the same name, and they move back and forth between these two components seamlessly. So it's not a surprise that Jews want to participate in those, if you will, civil religious qualities. But along with it comes the sense that, my goodness, you're also marking the holiday of another religion. So it's been a very interesting struggle. And the German Jews in the 19th century, not just in Cincinnati, Dan, but really wherever there were large German Jewish settlements, they were familiar with this holiday from Germany, which is where the Christmas tree and many of the American components to the holiday really came to this country. You find this phenomenon occurring.
A lot of people are interviewed in this, and a couple of people we've heard from already, and at the end of the show you'll hear a couple others. Many of them would be people who come from very prominent families in Cincinnati, and people either know them or they know of them. One of my questions, though, is this, the people who are interviewed, all are people who are my age or older,
Right.
And is this something that is still strong? Is this something that is changing? What would we find in Jewish homes today?
Well, again, you're going to find a diversity. First of all, the kind of phenomenon that is highlighted on this particular documentary is, in a sense, on the wane, as you sort of heard from that interview, meaning after the era of ethnicity, the growth of strong ethnic and religious identification in the post-1970s, 80s, and so forth, that sort of commemoration is falling out of disfavor. And so you're right, it's a generational issue in that regard. You'll see the folks who are in their 70s and 80s, some of them who remember that from childhood. Some of them still hold special feelings towards it, and some of them even feel badly that it's not quite as popular a custom as it once was. And so you do have it moving, Jews today moving away from that and feeling it, they want to reassert a more unique identity with Jewish life, and the Christmas tree and Christmas celebrations will be left out. On the other hand, there's a great deal of intermarriage in America today, and so you do have Jews and non-Jews marrying. That's a reality in American life, and in those homes, it's understandable that you will find Jews and non-Jews who want to try to maintain parts of both holidays. Now, there's a great deal of controversy on this topic. Most religious thinkers would like a home to be unified under one religious system. But that what religious leaders and thinkers might want isn't always what occurs in a house. And so you will.
Because there's
find,
marriages and children, you got to do
that's
it.
Right, exactly. So it is really a remarkable thing. And you know, just recently you may have heard Mr. O'Reilly made a comment at the beginning of December that even he was trying to advocate the idea that why should we stop saying Merry Christmas out in the streets? Why not say it? That's what it is. And in doing so, he says, well, even the Jews love Christmas. And that, of course, caused a firestorm because, on the one hand, there are elements of the Christmas holiday in America that we all love. After all, wasn't it this famous cantor's son, Israel Baleen? We know him as Irving Berlin, who wrote the most popular song.
Which
right?
is?
White Christmas.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know so many Jews who say to me, I love the music of Christmas. And people love that American feeling. After all, we're part and parcel of the fabric here. At the same time, how do we hold on to a uniquely Jewish identity in America? It's that tension.
You know, a lot of this, in the documentary, it becomes one of the themes that's played off, is it's the relationship between people of German Jewish background and Eastern European Jewish background.
Right.
And seeing these as really very different worlds.
That's correct.
Is that gulf been bridged? Has that been changing?
Yeah, that's really been bridged. After the closing of immigration in the mid-1920s, really almost finally in 1930, when these laws that were set into place shut down Jewish immigration from Eastern Europe, which would of course have very calamitous impact with regard to the impending Holocaust. We have a period of amalgamation. And so Jews have married one another, and those separate communities have dissipated. They're largely just a memory.
Yeah. There's still these distinctive traditions,
Absolutely.
though, Reformed, Conservative, and Orthodox.
Absolutely.
Those are still real.
Absolutely, definitely. And you still have residual hints or traces of that.
What does this, in a broader sense, what does this story and the story of Jews in America, and you were on the 350th commission that celebrated this a couple of years ago nationally, what does this tell us about the issue of immigration and assimilation in America? Because there's a great deal of concern that new immigrants are coming to America who don't hold traditional American traditions, culture, maybe from other religions. Paul Knitter and I were talking about Buddhists and people from Islam and Muslims, Hindus. What does this story tell us? What's the Jewish story tell us about assimilation in a larger sense?
Well, I think one answer would be, Dan, that the American Jew is unique in all of diaspora history because of the unique nature of America. This is an open society and a welcoming society, and that's fundamentally what it has been for the Jew as well as for other minorities. And what we learn from this is that the minority cultures wish to participate in the larger general society and also preserve these ethnic traditions. And the Jews are particularly, I mean, after all, it's a 3,000 plus year old tradition. And so you have, what this is this fascinating, uniquely American phenomenon of the American Jew who wants very badly and has been a part of this society from the very beginning, wants to participate. How does one do that without being taken up entirely and then disappear? How do we hold that almost very difficult tension between these two elements?
And that is a wonderful tension, but I think it's in a time of great immigration, when people seem to be very worried about this, I think that your comment, America is a very powerful magnet. It's a very special society.
Yes.
And that's the hopeful thing about
Yes,
this.
it is. Yes, it is. And I'm very positive, as you know, about Jewish life in this country.
And I'm just about out of time. So if you would like to order a copy of this documentary, it can be found at andthesearejews.com. okay, www.andthesearejews.com. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. If this time of the year can encourage desires to reach beyond ourselves with gestures of welcoming and kindness, curiosity and awe, it has served its purpose to establish a model for how we should strive to live every day of our lives. We close with some thoughts from two members of Cincinnati's German Jewish leadership. Have a good week.
It's important to be Jewish, but it's also important to be part of the American system, be assimilated. That was deeply embedded to me as a kid.
I am an American first, but I am a Jew.